Welcome to Brand Me. I'm Preston Konrad, and on this show, we'll talk all things branding, from launching a product line to owning your side hustle. We'll talk to the movers, the shakers, the thought leaders. What do you say we finally stop focusing on brands X, Y, and Z and focus on Brand Me? Let's start the show. Today's episode is brought to you by my brand, Preston Konrad Home. Living a stylish life does not have to be overly complicated or expensive. The magic of home decor is really made through the fun finishing touches, which quite too often come with big box middlemen and luxury brand price tags. With Preston Konrad Home, everybody can now inject major style into their space with minimal effort and no furniture shopping required with our new luxury home fragrance collection. Just in time for fall, you can choose from 5 stunning luxury candle scents, all made in America, or our new hand wash collection, both of which will instantly transport yourself to another world while transforming your space at the very same time. As a listener of today's show, you can take 10% off of your purchase of any single item on Preston Konrad Home using the offer code BRANDME. That's PrestonKonradHome.com, offer code BRANDME. Hey, everybody. On today's episode, I am joined by Joey Suchodolski. Joey is a publicist and consultant based in New York City, and I wanted to have him on to talk about when and why it's the right time to bring on a publicist to help get the word out about your brand or your personal brand. Joey gives a lot of insight about what the press field is like these days, what sort of placements will do for different areas of your business or your brand. And I think you'll find this conversation really helpful, especially if you're looking to start something, or maybe you have just started something. You're going to find a lot of gems in this episode. So take a seat, grab your coffee, and coming up is Joey Suchodolski. Hi, Joey. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I think this is so funny because you're like one of the 10 millionth people I've had on this podcast who I talk to on the regular, but
right.
Then have to talk to professionally here on the podcast. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, I said this at the top, but Joey is a whiz publicist here in New York. He's one of those guys, you know, when you watch those movies or TV shows about New York and there's always a publicist that is like double kissing with everybody when they go to a party. That's Joey. Everybody knows Joey. And that's how we met, right? We kind of met just through the PR world.
Yeah. I think it was back, I forget what agency I was at, but I think maybe it was UGG or one of the brands that I was working with at this time. We did something together, or I sent you some product or something like that.
I always remember you used to help me get into the shows.
Oh, yeah.
When I would be like in a line of people outside to be like, girl, come over this.
Got to pull in my favorites.
Yeah. But what I didn't mention earlier is that Joey actually is a publicist that works with us at Preston Konrad Home. And I figured I'd been wanting to do an episode on publicity. And I'm like, well, obviously, I got to bring in part of the family.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, before we get into all the details about what press can do for you and your brand, how the hell did you get into this world of PR? It's like so elusive.
It is pretty elusive. I mean, it's interesting. Some people kind of have a direct track into it. Some people kind of stumble upon it. I was a competitive figure skater for 15 years. And through that, I was exposed to the media. I did media training. So I kind of at a very early age had this like immersive experience with the world of media. Always loved fashion. I certainly can't draw to save my life, and I can barely add to save my life. So any kind of creative aspect of fashion, or kind of any mathematical buying type, avenue was certainly out for me. But I've been always really good, with writing and communicating. And I think that that's an area that I certainly have excelled in forever, basically. So it just kind of seemed like a natural fit. I was very like, I'm going to be a fashion publicist. And I was like, 17.
And you're so personable. I imagine that's like one of the things that has to come along with the job is being willing and ready to socialize with everybody at all times.
Exactly. For sure. But also, the flip side of it is you do kind of have to have a pretty strong backbone. It certainly isn't an easy industry, and you do have to say no a lot. There are things that you have to say no to, people that you have to say no to. There's a lot of negotiating involved. So yeah, it's being personable and saying no with a smile.
Were you always in-house? Because I knew you, because before you went on your own, you were like Mr. Corporate agency guy.
I've done both. I've been in-house and I've worked at agencies. I've worked at leading agencies, worked with high-end fashion brands, did, many years in Milan Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, and then in-house at super corporate brands as well. So pretty vast and varied background.
What do you like more?
It kind of all depends on the brand, if I'm being very honest, but I think definitely the consulting and in-house side of things is much more appealing to me, just because you get to be a little bit more, not even a little bit, quite a bit more involved with a brand in all kind of aspects of it. A lot of times when you're in an agency, for better or worse, you're an executor. So you're kind of executing the press strategy. You're just pitching. You're executing the event. And, the brands are typically coming to you with their strategy. And obviously, there's not that, being in an agency isn't very strategic in a lot of ways, but it can be a little bit cookie cutter in a lot of ways. Yeah. Whereas if I'm consulting or if I'm in-house, I kind of have that opportunity to look at, well, how does advertising align with influencer, align with PR, align with events, align with what's coming down the pipeline in a year, 2 years, even 5 years, and kind of being able to kind of have a voice in setting that strategy so that everything's really cohesive.
Yeah, actually, so I made me realize we never really... What for those listening who aren't in our world, which I just assume at this point everyone's in our world, but there are so many people that listen
everyone's
to this.
Everyone's in our world, but also everyone's listening.
Yes, exactly. What is the main job of a publicist?
That's the thing. It varies every day. My job can be very different from day to day, which is great because it keeps things exciting. And that's what I love about what I do. And what I love about PR is that no day is ever going to be exactly the same. There's not a lot of that like redundancy in what your day to day looks like. Yeah. But I would say, if you're looking at what is the true kind of cornerstone of PR, it's earned media coverage. So getting press coverage, whether it be print, whether it be digital, getting that in an earned way through my relationships and my outreach with the media. But again, there's a lot that falls under the umbrella of PR. It's events. We just had a great event with you not that long ago in your studio where we brought together some top editors to meet and greet and check out your newest launches. So it's executing events. It could be, it could be very much that, or it could be, a brand or a client wants to gift 20 top tier influencers or do an influencer programming that's paid and it's negotiating the contract. So that's the kind of interesting thing is that, there's always a lot of variation in what my day-to-day looks like. But I think, the true kind of cornerstone of what the PR industry is and what I do is earned media coverage.
It's so funny because it must have rapidly changed so much from the days of just good old print, your top 5 books, magazines, to now what you just described, influencer, personalities. I can imagine.
It's wild. I mean, I still joke with some of my friends in the industry, and we'll joke about when I started, GQ had an editor who only covered eyewear.
The good old days. The
for
eyewear.
Print. Just eyewear for print.
Yeah.
And then Vanity Fair infamously had a hats and belts editor.
Oh, God, what a dream.
So those days are long gone.
Yeah.
I've been in the industry for a while. I've been in the industry, longer than 12 years, but, we're not talking 25 years ago. We're talking 8 years ago, Vanity Fair had a hats and belts editor, and it's changed so rapidly. And now, print media, I will never, ever say that print media is dying or will ever be dead, but it certainly has changed and evolved a lot. Yeah. Editors, quite frankly, are stretched, I think, thinner than ever, both print and digital as well. I think, we've seen over the years kind of the condensation at a lot of the larger publishing houses. So, Hearst has some editors that cover men's throughout the whole portfolio of brands. So they'll kind of, call in for Men's Health, for Esquire. If, one of the women's focused publications is including a male model, they'll call on for that. And on the digital side of things, again, 8, even 5 years ago, you had editors that covered beauty, that covered accessories, that covered ready to wear fashion. And now they're covering it all. They're kind of, really, I kind of, don't envy them, but it also makes it more difficult for the publicist as well.
I can't imagine. Well, it's also because the industry shift, a lot of people, like, not saying myself, but a lot of people became their own editors in having their own Instagram pages and putting out their own content, these own editorials, which leads me to my next question, right? Like personal brands becoming product lines. I'm one of many people who have decided to finally launch a business or launch a brand. And it takes a lot of work. But when is the point for a new brand or a personal brand to say, you know what, we need maybe a publicist? Like, when is that point? How do you know when it's right?
I think honestly, at this point in the way that the media landscape is, and this is not something that I would have said even maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but I honestly think it's at the inception of the brand, maybe even before the brand launches at this point, because the media landscape has changed so much and there is so much that kind of falls under the umbrella of PR, marketing, advertising, communications as an umbrella. I really think the best time, and it's certainly, it's never too late, but I think the best time is really, when a brand is launching, because that in and of itself is such a moment. The brand launch is so important, and how, that's your first kind of interaction, your first kind of introduction to the consumer and to the industry. So I think you really want to have, really kind of have everything tied up and put a bow on that when you're having your kind of first interaction with the consumer.
It's so funny because I don't think we started working together right when I launched, but it wasn't far after. It was pretty soon after. But looking back at it, I remember on launch day, I'm sitting here at this very computer with David from my team, and we were we hit the button, and like a lot happened, but it's not like someone like came out of the walls and gave me like a cake. I mean, there was no like massive explosion. But thinking about if we had an adjoining article that launched at that same time, what the impact could have been like.
Totally.
So that makes a lot of sense, maybe even ahead of time launching the brand.
And I think, kind of going back to editors and how much they have on their plate too, is the process has become longer in a lot of ways, even on the digital side. Like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I could pitch an editor or something, and if they were interested, it would go up in a day or two. That still happens to a certain degree, but even now, the digital kind of editorial calendars and the stories that they're doing are planned out so much more in advance. It used to be like I would tell people that we need 2 weeks heads up, and now I'm like, love to have 2 months.
Yeah, totally.
And I can work with whatever. But it's also gotten, they're busier and they're needing to churn out more and more content more than ever. Which
could be a good thing because they need more to write about, right? So for all these new brands coming into the space, it could be a good thing that the cycle changes so quickly because there's always room for more brands to be written about. Yeah,
definitely. For sure.
What, I feel like, speaking of more brands, and you tell me if I'm going crazy, do you think that brands now, because everything's so cluttered and there's so many Instagram brands and so many D2C brands and so many old brands that are reinventing, and there's just a lot of fucking noise, and like I'm just like, hi, I'm just trying to sell my candles, please. Right. Do you think brands like mine, or like someone who may be listening who's launching something, need to make even more bigger noise? Or is there something to just like a really good story? Like, does it have to be flashy and crazy and stunty?
I think it all depends on what that person or that brand's key objective is. I think there's something to be said for both, quite frankly. I think, clear, concise, consistent messaging is always going to work. But, the flip side of that is it may not always work quickly, because it may take a while for things to kind of catch on, for editors to kind of, familiarize themselves with the brand, see the name of the brand or the name of the company in their inbox and be like, okay, yeah, this is cool. This is something I want to feature. Slow and steady is always going to win the race. But again, depending on what your objective is, big and flashy is big and flashy, and that if you want to kind of blanket the market, in a kind of, overnight, you kind of have to be a little bit big and flashy.
What do you think about, I have so many friends just in the business who it's like I'm sure publicists hate people talking about this, but people being like, oh, PR is the one thing I can't like track, I can't track it. Who knows what I got out of PR? Like, all my friends in the business, everyone says this stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Because I value when I see my name in Forbes and my picture in Forbes, like I can't put a value on that, right? Like to me, Correct. That's like invaluable. Like Correct. I'm going to frame it. But for someone debating getting into using a publicist, working with a publicist to get the name out, how do you kind of coach them off that ledge of like, well, I don't get to see how many clicks and this and that?
I'm honest with them. It is, public relations, PR, it's a gray area. There is that element of PR that is just not tangible that other aspects of business are. I think, it's important to create benchmarks. It's important to look at, what are key outlets for a brand that we know work. And I always say, to prospective clients, like, I'm not going to promise you unless you're coming to me and saying, you have X amount of money in advertising dollars and we can go into, a Hearst or a Condé Nast or a Modern Luxury and advertise. I can't guarantee you anything. This is earned. Yes, you're paying me. I can't tell you what your ROI is going to be. All I can tell you is that I know PR works.
And it's worked for a long time.
It's worked for a long time. There is a track record there. There's a reason why they're a publicist, right? But I'm just honest with people, when we can look at, I always say too, and I'm sure I've said this to you many times, like, you can look at an outlet like Forbes that has like over 100 million UVPM per month. So, and for any listener that doesn't know, that's the
I was going to say, what does that mean?
Unique viewers per month. So how many kind of like fresh new eyes are on a particular digital outlet? And then, you can have that doesn't necessarily move the needle because maybe 75 million of those eyes are completely uninterested in what it is or whatever. And sometimes it's the outlets that have 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 that I see brands sell out of a product if it's featured. And again, that also is hard to kind of, prepare for until you actually see that happen. And I tell a lot of clients and prospective, entrepreneurs and people thinking about starting a brand. Like I look at press as kind of, your stock portfolio. You want it to be this like well-diversified fund. You want to have your traditional print media. You want to have your top tiers, your Vogues.com, your GQs.com. And then you want to have some more niche publications. And then we evaluate what is working and what isn't and where we're kind of seeing a return from and kind of shape a strategy from there.
That's such a good way to think about it, like your little stock portfolio. I mean, the other thing worth noting is like when all these people trying to really track ROI on PR, it's like you look at like what getting on Oprah's list could do for a brand, right? Like that's PR. I mean, well, in the early days it was. Now there may be a little more of like integrations and stuff with like
you mean how
affiliates.
Every product of Oprah's favorite thing this year had to be available on Amazon.com?
Right. Like it's getting narrower
and
narrower.
Shade, but just no shade. Again, the evolution of kind of the industry.
Right. But if you think about what it originally did as just a pure press play for a no-name brand, I mean, the value there is like immeasurable, right?
1,000%. And those moments, unfortunately, are like more few and far between than they used to be because there has been such an integration with advertising and affiliates and all of that, because I remember those moments with brands and, what a Wall Street Journal article could do or an Oprah, could do or a GQ cover could do. And like, I hate to be like, in the old days, but it's changed.
Well, also like what you wanted from a GQ cover now maybe is like what you want from the guy on like Summer House, right? That you see on Instagram. Like they're so different. Like we're getting the exposure on Instagram and TikTok so frequently. Correct. I mean, the other way to look at it, what do you think about, I always look at PR for a brand, a personal brand, a product line as something to help you fuel your end goal, right? So like for me, or maybe someone like me who wants to go raise capital, I think it's great to say publication XYZ gave us their stamp of approval. Like maybe it's not to instantly move products. Don't you think? Correct. Do you ever need to tell people that it's not about selling goods from this article? Like maybe that's not the point of this.
No, all the time. And I think it kind of goes back to the analogy of like the well-diversified, stock portfolio is like, I've always said like, sometimes it's that GQ placement that moves the needle, but oftentimes it not necessarily is. Maybe it's, an inside hook, maybe it's a valet or a smaller, more niche targeted online outlet that is actually going to move the needle. So we need to have all of it, right? Like we need to reach out and get all those things. But I think to your point, when you're looking at, and also too, for brands that are looking to wholesale, press coverage is very important to know that there is an editorial fashion community or lifestyle community or whatever space you fall into, that those editors and those publications are buying into the product, puts the buyers at a Bloomingdale's, at a Nordstrom, at a Neiman Marcus, or the independent, stores, that puts them at ease knowing that there's that credibility there.
Yeah, it's kind of like a trade-off of the stamp of approval. Like Bloomingdale's makes you approved, but so does Ford. Like they kind of like work hand in hand a little bit.
Exactly right.
What are your thoughts on, I know I struggle with this, and, I know many people that listen that maybe just started something and maybe they're hand making something. Maybe they've got really limited quantity. They spent so much money trying to buy their first 100, whatever.
Yeah.
But then they hear from someone like a publicist or an advisor that they need to send out 500 influencer gifts. What are your thoughts on that and how important it is?
I think there is a certain importance there, but I think it goes kind of back to, your point about what is the long-term strategy. And, that's something that I found with brands is that, and that's why I think it can be really beneficial to bring on PR at the inception, pre-launch, is so that you have someone who can manage your expectations and can tell you like, this is what we're going to need to do to achieve this. And if we can't, that's okay. But then we have to manage expectations and look at what we can achieve with what we have. Yeah. And I think that's where, you want to find, a publicist who's transparent and upfront with you. And I think, the biggest thing, and I think this, and I think any entrepreneur kind of does, is you have to go with your gut too. Like if you're not getting a good vibe, if you don't think you're a good fit, not every publicist, there are great publicists that maybe are not perfect for every brand or a small brand or something like that. They might be more experienced with working with a big corporate luxury house or something like that. So I think it's also finding the right fit for a publicist. And, you can certainly be scrappy in this industry. Yeah. You don't have to send out 500 products. Does it help? Yeah, it does. Yeah. If we can't do that, okay. But then the expectations kind of have to match where we are.
It has to adjust accordingly. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's scalable, right? Like everything is kind of scalable.
Yep. It works in small and large doses, right? Yeah.
For sure.
What are your thoughts on, I think now more than ever, a lot of people are focused on their personal brand as an maybe they don't have a product. They have no product, no goods, maybe it's no real services. Maybe it's truly just like, I'm in, XYZ. I've got 300,000 followers and I want press for me, Jane Smith. What are your thoughts on personal publicity and that world for someone's personal brand?
I love it and I hate it.
Yeah, right.
I think, look, does it work? Can it work? Can it be helpful? Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is the consumer now, and when I say consumer, it can be someone buying a product or someone consuming media, someone viewing a TikTok or viewing a Bravo show. I think the biggest thing for someone who wants to be a personality, whether that's if that's a digital creator, whether that's an influencer or a TikToker, is being authentic, right? And whatever you're being authentic to, like whatever your vibe is, whatever your kind of story is, it's just being authentic to that. I think people can really see through that now, especially when there's such a saturated market of personalities. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's why you've been so successful with what you have done, and also how you've scaled your own personal brand, right? And I think that's another thing too, is if you are wanting to build a personal brand, I think you need to look at not necessarily your end goal, right? Because that can always evolve and change, because Lord knows the industry is evolving and changing day to day. But you can't be short-sighted. You have to think about like, what is this going to look like, sound like, feel like? How is this going to age in a year, because that's how quick things are now.
I think about that all the time. I actually go through and like randomly, in like one of the social platforms will pop up like this memory of yours from 10 years ago.
Yes.
And I'll see it and I'm like, delete.
Yeah.
Like what was I thinking? Wearing that or saying that or going and drinking that or whatever. Where, cause now the cycle is so much more hypercritical and focused. Interesting. I like that. What brands do you think are killing it right now from a PR point of view?
What is great and also challenging is there are a lot of brands that are doing a lot of really, really great things. I think, since, you're very much in the menswear and lifestyle space, I think you can look at some of the iconic brands, right? Like, is Diptyque ever not going to be doing well? Certainly not. I think it's interesting to see what Maison Francis Kirk de Jean is doing kind of in that high-end fragrance.
Oh my God, I started wearing that stuff like years ago, and now I feel like I may have to retire it. I feel like it's like the hottest brand at the moment.
It's the new Le Labo, right? It's the new Le Labo. Like there's that life cycle too of even these like niche brands are blowing up. And I think we have social media to thank for that. Yep. Again, for better or worse, it's great for brands. It's not great for people I know like you and I who love to, not smell like everyone else in the room.
Oh yeah. I had to retire my Le Labo for that, for the Baccarat. And now I'm like, damn it, it's everywhere.
Totally. But again, to their credit, I think, brands like that. And you look at what Diptyque has done in terms of like who does not have a repurposed Diptyque vessel in their apartment? Like who doesn't have their Q-tips in a Diptyque jar, you know? So there's that, right? I think, it's really interesting to see too, a brand like Todd Snyder and what the Champion collaboration and now more recently the LL Bean collaboration has done for that brand to turn it from, maybe a more insider brand. People certainly in the fashion industry, in the menswear space, people that were kind of, maybe a little bit more conscious or knowledgeable about fashion were aware of Todd Snyder. But I think now with the Champion collaboration and the fact that has kind of become an evergreen collaboration that's happening every year, every season, it's, really amassed a more kind of mainstream presence, which I think, again, is great.
Do you think collaborations are still in for new brands coming up? Do you think that's still an important tool?
I do. I think they have to be really well thought out. I think they have to make sense. I think what doesn't work is, okay, and maybe I'll take that back a little bit. What can work is a completely unexpected collaboration, but you also have to be mindful because that's often sometimes the collaborations that like really don't make sense either. Like, you want to surprise people, but like, you don't want to surprise them so much that it just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But I think where collaborations are still impactful is, of course, there's all the things, right? That you get two brands, consumer base, and like all of that stuff. But also for someone like me, it's an opportunity to sell something new to an editor. Like I'm always looking for, and I don't want to say newness because I never want a brand to produce so much that that's all they're doing. I think there's something so great to be said for, a brand that just still only launches like one seasonal collection or, different things like that. But, anytime I have something new to talk about to an editor, it's a great opportunity. And obviously it lends itself to coverage potential.
Speaking of, and I'll show it because this is not on video and no one at home can see, but I'll send you one of these soon. They're insane.
I know it's in there.
I'm showing Joey a new piece of our collection, but your mind's gonna be blown. We're running out of time, and I ask people some of these questions all the time. Do you have like a personal branding fail, a Joey fail, or a corporate fail that ended up becoming a Joey blessing?
Correct.
A brand blessing.
Absolutely. I think when I first started consulting, I certainly bit off more than I could chew.
Really?
Yeah, I think
we all do that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it's not an uncommon fail. And one that even as I was failing, I was like, you're not going to fail. You're not going to bite off more than you can chew. But, especially coming from agency background, corporate background, I'm like, oh, I can do all this because I do all this. But then when it's just me, and I'm having to send out the press placements and I'm having to put together the weekly reports and do all the admin stuff. And, it's not that I didn't think of that. I just didn't think of the actual timing and how that all works. And I think, you can't be everything to everyone. So I think, really taking on clients or whatever your kind of branding is, really doubling down and engaging with brands, companies, people that you can be successful with. I definitely think that was a fail, but also a blessing.
Well, we're very similar people. And it takes a lot for me to like reject an opportunity,
Exactly.
but I think there's a lot of importance and weight in being like, you know what, it would serve both of us the wrong way if I said yes to this.
Totally.
And then my last question is there some sort of, it could be any brand ever. I just love this question. I love knowing, is there any brand moment that you had at some point in your life that like still sticks with you? Like an interaction with a brand that like, whether it was good, bad, nostalgic, that you're just like, it stood out?
Yes. My very first, so I was like, a little fashion boy from day one.
Yes.
And I just remember my aunt took me to King of Prussia Mall outside Philadelphia, which was like,
Yeah.
Took me to Neiman Marcus, where you could valet at Neiman Marcus, which I just thought was the coolest thing ever.
So chic.
So chic. And I think I was like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, certainly preteen. And my very first high-end, like over $100 purchase, which was obviously purchased for me, was this electric blue, almost neoprene, which like very pre-neoprene.
Yeah.
Moschino electric blue polo shirt that just was super simple, which obviously Moschino has gone on to not be very simple
Not be so simple.
Just had a little white square right here at the end of the polo placket that said Moschino. And that was it. That was like my first high-end luxury fashion.
Isn't it crazy? It's like
I wish I still had it.
I wish you did too. You could make a lot of fucking money off it probably if you sold it now. Anything 90s and Moschino right now, you'd kill.
Totally.
I love asking that question because so many people have, and a lot of the answers I get are brands that we still like very much engage with today. And that's obviously another one that's really hot today. So clearly they're doing something right.
And then of course, like obviously like kind of like crazy, nostalgic moments is like, as kind of a little bit of a traditionalist in a lot of ways, like my first GQ placement was just like,
probably like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
My first time I went to like Vogue for a desk side and like went into the Vogue office.
Oh yeah. I mean, like when it was at 4 Times Square.
4 Times Square.
Yeah. That was the best.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We could go on forever.
I know, right?
Joey, that was the most helpful conversation. I feel like so many great people that listen to our show have a great idea. They're ready to get out there. And I think this is one of the missing links. So I'm so glad you took time to chat with me today.
I'm so happy that you had me on. It was a pleasure.
And then I'll call you offline and we'll talk shop.
Absolutely. You know where to find. Lucky for you, you have access to me every day.
Totally. And best of luck with everything going on and Happy New Year.
Thank you. You as well.
Talk to you soon. For more on the show, you can find us on Instagram at Brand Me Podcast or at Preston Konrad. Be sure, of course, to rate, review, and subscribe and share on social. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.